My name's Danny Crone, I'm the Technical Director for Enfocus, and today we're going to be looking at Visual Studio 2010. In specific, we're going to look at the test impact collector and try and answer this question, is this what we've been looking for, testing? So let's crack straight on. The first thing we're going to do is look at the application under test. It's a small web-based calculator application, and what we're going to do is have a quick look at it. Then we're going to have a look in Visual Studio 2010 at the facilities that are offered there for us. We're going to look at the test and lab manager, and then we're going to run through a full cycle. We're going to do test, we're going to execute some tests, we're going to find a bug, report that bug, then we're going to fix it, produce another build, and then go for the retest. And we'll see how the test impact collector helps us with all of that. So let's go and have a look at the calculator application. And here we see it's just a simple web application, and it has two input fields. We can put 10 in the first, 5 in the second, and then we can perform all the operations. We see that divide equals 2, multiply equals 50, minus equals 5, and add the two numbers together to total 15. So that's our calculator application. So let's have a look in Visual Studio. And in here we can see our product backlog, and in here we can see our user stories. So we have 4 user stories for this particular demo, and they're quite simple. Add 2 numbers, subtract 2 numbers, multiply 2 numbers, and divide 2 numbers. And if we open any one of these up, we should be able to see the test cases that are linked to them. So here we have a divide a number by 0, and this is actually where we're going to find one of the defects in the application. So let's have a look at the test and lab manager, and in here what we can see is the test plan, and here we can see our requirements on the left hand side, and as we cycle down those we can see the test cases that apply to those requirements. So here's our divide 2 numbers, and we can see it divide a number by 0 test case. And the important thing here is the fact that we're dealing with one repository. It's a shared repository across the Visual Studio and the Microsoft Test and Lab Manager. So let's move on to our test tab and actually go ahead and execute some of these tests. So first of all, I'm going to pick the add test and I'm going to run them with options. I'm going to select the latest build and also use the local test run. Now we don't have video recording on at the moment, but what we're going to do is turn it on for the last test where we actually find a defect. So we click on run, and what happens now is it fire up the test runner, and the test runner will open up some data adapters that will collect the information that we're interested in behind the scenes. So we're going to overwrite the existing action recording, and we're going to start this test. First of all, it tells us to start the calculator application, so we'll do that. And again, this will take a little bit longer because it's actually collecting information from IIS in the background. So once that fires up, we can pass this particular step. And now it tells us to enter the numbers 10 and 20. So we'll enter 10, we'll tab across, and enter 20 and tab off. Probably worthwhile taking a look here at the actions that are being recorded as we're going along, and we'll see that it's actually collected 2 tab sequences which we don't really need, so we'll go ahead and delete those. And really this is just best practice to make sure that we end up with quite clean recordings. So move that down again and pass that particular test, click the add button, and we should expect 30, and indeed we get 30. So we'll pass that test. Click on End Test. We'll overwrite the existing recording. And here we see our list of attachments. And in this list of attachments, probably the most important one is our testimpact.xml. And this is the one that allows us to determine which tests are impacted by any code churn. So we're going to save and close that. And now we'll move on to our subtract test. Again, run that with the same options. We'll try and speed through this one a little bit quicker. Start the calculator app. So we'll pass that step. to numbers 40 and 20. Click the subtract. End that test and save and close. So now we'll move on to our multiply test, and we'll pay a little bit more attention here, but essentially this is a test that we're going to build a regression error into later. Start the calculator application. So that passes. We're going to enter the numbers 10 and 30. So 10 times 30 equals 300, that's what we expect. So we're going to pass this particular test this time. We're going to end the test, just make sure that our test impact is there, which it is, and we'll save and close. So now what we're going to do is have a look at the lab center and specifically the test settings. This is where you turn on data adapters, and we'll have a look at the ones that we're interested in here, particularly the test impact and the IntelliTrace. But for this one, we're going to turn on the video recorder. There are options with these things, but it's only very limited for the video recorder. You can change the amount of time. So save that, and we'll finish that. And move back into our testing center and move on to our final test, divide a number by 0. So we'll run that with some options. And again, we'll create an action recording. In fact, we don't need to create an action recording for this because we know this particular test case is going to fail. So we'll start it up, open the calculator application. So that passes. Enter the numbers 100 and 0. That passes. And then we can click the divide button. And this is where we find our error, so we'll expand the screen so we can see as much of that as possible. We're going to fail this at this point, and we're going to say unhandled exception. So what we're actually going to do now is we're going to create a bug right here. So if we do that, it'll gather all the relevant information, and there's two particular files that I'm interested in here. The first one is the video link file. Now that's maintained a recording of all of the steps that we've actually performed whilst we were executing this test. And also this iTrace file. This iTrace file is the IntelliTrace, or what was called historical debugging, and this allows the developers to identify the exact spot or location of the defect. So in terms of the videos, it also gives you some keystrokes straight into the video, and this one here is where I choose to start the video. So if we go here, we can see the execution of our tests at the point that it failed. And there we see the exception. So you see that's very useful for the developer. So all we really need to do here is add a title. Divide by 0 is not handled correctly. We can assign that to me. And that's pretty much everything we need to do. We could add some additional information if we wanted to, but it's fairly conclusive anyways. So we can resume here, end the test, and save and close. All of that information gets bundled up with the test case or the execution itself as well. So we can see that particular test has failed there. So what would we do next? We'd go into Visual Studio, and as a developer I'd have a look at which bugs are assigned to me. So here we can see our defect. I'll open that one up just so we can see more of it. And again, we see all of the information, the hooks into the video file, and the IntelliTrace. What I'm actually going to do is just have a look at this IntelliTrace file. And as you can see, we can see our threads, and we can actually go into one of the threads here. This allows the developer to go straight to an exception, for example. And here you see it opens the source file, and it takes us straight to our point where we divide by a 0. So this allows the developer to identify fairly categorically where a defect has occurred. So what we can do is we stop that debugging now. We go and have a look at our source code so we know where the defect resides. And as you'll see here, I've already got some code that I prepared earlier, so I'm just going to uncomment those. But also, whilst I'm here, I've noticed that I forgot to do something earlier, so that's my regression failure that I'm building in now. I'm going to save that. And just do a quick build to make sure I haven't broken anything. Rebuild is successful, so that's all okay. Have a look here at the pending changes. And we can see the file that we've changed, but also here we can have a look at work items, and it shows us that bug, and we can actually say that this check-in goes some way to resolve this defect. So in the comments for this check-in I can say fixed defect and a bit housekeeping. We check in. And now that we've done that, we can go ahead and schedule a build. So we'll just monitor this build through. But basically we have a single server box implementation here. So it is the TFS server, it is the client, it's everything. But it's sending it to be scheduled on a build controller and effectively on a build agent. And what this does provide us with is a log of exactly what gets built. So all of the code changes, all of the work items that are associated with this particular build, and of course, as we'll see, also the tests that are impacted. And this serves as a really good delivery note for testing. So here we see the change set that was implemented. We see the work item, that particular defect, and we can also see the impacted tests. And it says that there's one impacted test. So if we have a look at that, it says the multiply two positive numbers together. And so that's been highlighted as a test that needs to be re-executed because that code path has been changed. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and accept that build. And we'll look at the builds folder on the server. And we can see that we've got a 26.2. So we'll deploy that locally. Check that we've got our calculator app working. Indeed it does. So we'll, as a tester might do, the first thing they'll do is come into here as a test manager. We'll go to the tracking tab and we'll assign a build. This allows us to select the latest build and assign it to the plan. But down here we can see the divide by 0 defect has been implemented in this particular build. So if we assign that to the plan, that gives us the ability to view recommended tests, which we can do. and we can see it's telling us the multiply two positive numbers together needs to be re-executed. So we're going to reset this to active. That means that in our test plan we can see that it needs to be re-executed. So if we come in here, we can see that add two numbers together doesn't need to be executed. The subtract is also still okay. This one needs to be re-executed again, and of course this one still needs to be re-executed because it's failed on a defect. So we'll go ahead and execute this one, and what we'll do is we'll use the recording that we had before to run this through a higher speed. It's what we call fast forward. So we'll start the test, and there's several different ways of doing this, but what I'm actually going to do is just say to play them all, and I'm going to hands off the keyboard now, and hopefully this should go ahead and execute our test. As you can see, it leaves me at the end expecting 300, but we actually get 299, and therefore we can at this point raise a defect. So I think that's about that's about all that I would like to cover right now. So that concludes the demo. Just going back to the original question, is this what we've been looking for? Well, I think in a more agile kind of world, the objective is to keep things simple. And if you take, for example, the defect handling side of things, then can it actually get any more simple than that? All of the information is attached, and you simply have to write a title. It's great for me personally. That's great news. I don't have to waste my time, writing up laborious defect reports and repros. Of course, then there's the whole joined upness of the whole product set. Really, from user stories to test cases to test executions to defects to the test impact. All of that works really well, and of course that ability to be able to predict which tests need to be re-executed as a result of code churn. I've never been in a position where a system's been able to tell me that. So yeah, definitely it's what I've been looking for. But of course, you need to be using it as a whole team. The whole team approach needs to be involved in using this. So I'd like to say thanks for taking the time to watch this, and I hope you found it useful. I've put some information up on the screen there. There's my contact information. Please feel free to drop me an email. There's our blog site and also our regular website. So if you want to just take a visit there, then please do so. Thank you very much.